What's up, Lions Nation? Yesterday, the roar echoed louder than ever, and that victory was nothing short of spectacular. The Detroit Lions stepped on the field with fire in their eyes, showing grit, intensity, and the soul of a true contender. Every play was an explosion of energy. Every touchdown was the cry of an entire city, and every defensive stand proved this team is ready to take on anyone who dares to cross our path. This wasn't just a win. This was a statement, a message to the whole league that Detroit is not here to play games. What we witnessed yesterday was more than football. It was passion, it was unity, it was the identity of a team carried by one of the most loyal and powerful fan bases in the NFL. And listen, if you cheered, screamed, and jumped out of your seat as much as I did, smash that like button right now, because our community of fans is the true power behind this roar. The more likes, the louder Lions Nation gets, and the more the league feels our presence. So get ready, because today we're diving deep into every single detail of that epic victory. This is the time to celebrate. This is the time to believe, because the future in Detroit is shining bright, and the best is yet to come. What just happened with the Detroit Lions is the kind of turning point that makes you stop, rewind, and say, wait a second, is this the moment we've all been waiting for? Because if you followed this team for years, you know the story. Slow starts, shaky rhythms in the first few games, plenty of hype in the offseason, and then frustration when things don't click until mid-season. But what we just witnessed against the Chicago Bears was something completely different. This wasn't just a win. This was a statement. This was the Lions proving that Dan Campbell and his staff are not just building a contender. They're building a culture that's ready to take over the NFC right now. And for the first time, we saw the Lions dismantle not just an opponent, but one of their own. A disciple of Dan Campbell himself.
That storyline alone is enough to grab every Detroit fan by the collar and say, pay attention, because this season is already rewriting the script. Let's break this down, because the weight of what happened goes deeper than the scoreboard. The Lions came into Week 2 of the 2025 season needing a response. Week 1 was a gut punch, a 27-13 loss that reopened all the old wounds about the offense struggling to find itself early in the year. Sound familiar? That's been the story for years. But then came Chicago, a divisional rival, a chance to test themselves against Ben Johnson. Yes, the same Ben Johnson who could have gone anywhere last season, including Washington, and instead landed with the Bears. The same Ben Johnson whose fingerprints were all over this offense for years. And what did the Lions do? They didn't just beat him. They lit him up, 52-21. A number so loud, so definitive, that it silences every single doubt about whether this team can get rolling early. And here's the kicker, this wasn't Ben Johnson's Lions anymore. This was John Morton stepping into the spotlight with Jared Goff, and together they found something this team has never had in September, a rhythm, a flow, a chemistry that clicked faster than any season in recent memory. Look at the history. In 2024, it took 4 games before the Lions caught fire, finally waking up in a shootout against Seattle. In 2023, the offense stumbled through 21, 20, and 20-point performances before finding its legs. In 2022, the fast starts were only because the defense was giving up so many points they were forced into shootouts. This time, Week 2, game over, rhythm established, Bears dismantled. That's new. That's different. That's why this win feels like a turning point. Now, let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't all roses in the first quarter. The Bears came out ready to trade punches. At the end of that first frame, it was practically dead even, 130 total yards for Detroit, 122 for Chicago. It looked like we were in for a nail-biter. But then, the switch flipped. That's where Dan Campbell's fingerprints were all over this game. The adjustments, the discipline, the refusal to let this team get rattled. Kelvin Shepard's defense tightened the screws, Aaron Glenn shifted gears, and suddenly Chicago's offense was locked in a box. What had looked like a balanced fight turned into a one-sided demolition. And that's the hallmark of great coaching. The greats, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, John Harbaugh, they all made their names by not just winning games, but outcoaching their former assistants when they crossed paths. Campbell just joined that club. Think about how much that means for this franchise. For decades, the Lions have been the team everyone else circles on the calendar as the get-right game. Now, they're the ones dishing out reality checks. Chicago, a team many thought was finally ready to make noise in the NFC North, is now sitting 0-2 in conference play, and the Lions made it look easy. The message couldn't be clearer. You don't get to the top of this division without going through Detroit. And right now, nobody's ready for that fight. The other thing that can't be ignored is the mentality. For the second straight week, the defense got hit early. Against the Packers in Week 1, it was 2 quick possessions before the clamps came down. Against Chicago, it was 1. That's the difference. That's growth. Aaron Glenn's group is no longer folding under early pressure. They're absorbing it, adjusting, and slamming the door shut. That resilience, that bend but don't break mentality turning into bend once and then break everything in sight. That's the kind of edge that turns a good team into a contender. And let's not gloss over the consistency either. Dan Campbell's Lions haven't lost 2 straight games in over 2 years. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's culture. That's leadership. Every time this team stumbles, they bounce back harder. And this time, it wasn't just a bounce back, it was a statement to the rest of the league. Now, the road ahead doesn't get easier. The Baltimore Ravens are up next, and they're coming off a clean win over Cleveland. That's going to be a fight. But after what we just saw against Chicago, do you really doubt that Campbell, Morton, Shepard, and Glenn can draw up another masterclass? Do you really doubt that Jared Goff and this offense can stay in rhythm? Because if you watched what they did in week 2, you know this is different. This isn't last year's Lions. This isn't the same old script. And that's where I want to leave it with you, the fans. Because this feels like the start of something we've never seen before. The Detroit Lions aren't waiting until midseason to find their groove. They're here. They're rolling. They're dismantling rivals. They're proving Dan Campbell belongs in the conversation with the best coaches in football. But the question is, what do you think? Is this the moment we look back on and say, that's when it all started? Or do you still need to see more before you believe this team is ready to take over? Let me know in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started, and I want to hear exactly where you stand on the Lions after this absolute statement win. And here's the thing, when you take a step back and look at everything that went down against the Bears, it wasn't just about the scoreboard or even the bragging rights of beating a familiar face like Ben Johnson. This was about identity. For years, Detroit has been searching for one. A team that fans could point to and say, that's us, that's who we are. We've had flashes, sure, a big win here, a dramatic comeback there. But consistency, a clear DNA that separates this team from the rest of the league, that's been missing. Until now. What stood out more than anything was the way the offense functioned under John Morton. We've all been conditioned to believe that the Lions live and die by Ben Johnson's genius. But Sunday shattered that narrative. Morton didn't just pick up the pieces and try to copy-paste Johnson's playbook. He crafted a rhythm that Jared Goff was clearly comfortable with, something that felt both fresh and lethal. The speed with which they got into sync is what makes this so significant. In years past, we've waited, sometimes painfully, for the offense to click. Now, it's week 2. And we're already talking about one of the most explosive games in recent memory. That's not just improvement, it's evolution. And it wasn't only the offense making noise. Kelvin Shepard deserves a massive spotlight here. Think about the growth this defense has shown in just 2 games. Last year, the narrative was that the Lions had to win shootouts because the defense couldn't hold up. This year, 2 straight weeks of early pressure. 2 straight weeks of adjustments, and 2 straight weeks of shutting the door after those first possessions. That kind of discipline and adaptability is the hallmark of a unit that understands its identity. They're not panicking, they're not folding, they're answering. And as a fan, how long has it been since you could honestly say you trusted a Lions defense to handle business when it mattered most? Let's also talk about Dan Campbell for a second, because what makes this even more special is that he's proving his coaching tree is real. Every great dynasty has that feature. Belichick, Saban, Reed, they didn't just win games, they produced disciples. And then, when those disciples crossed paths with the master, more often than not, they got schooled. Campbell just got his first taste of that moment. And he didn't just sneak by, he dominated. That matters. It tells the entire league that this isn't just a coach riding momentum or leaning on coordinators. This is a head coach building a legacy. Now, looking forward, it's impossible not to get excited about the bigger picture. Baltimore looms large. That game is going to be a litmus test, no doubt about it. But what makes this so different from years past is the timing. The Lions aren't limping into that challenge. They're striding in, confident, prepared, and with the momentum of a statement win that has fans across the league taking notice. This isn't about hope anymore. This is about proof. But let's not forget the emotional weight of this either. Beating Chicago wasn't just another W in the standings. It was a shot across the bow of the entire NFC North. For decades, this division has been defined by Green Bay's dominance, Chicago's history, Minnesota's flashes. The Lions? Always the afterthought. But this win, and more importantly, the way it happened, shifts that narrative. Detroit is no longer chasing respect. They're demanding it. And when you beat a divisional rival by 31 points, led by your former offensive architect, you're not just playing football, you're sending a message. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway here. This team isn't satisfied with just being good. They want to prove they're different. They want to prove they're the ones everyone else has to measure themselves against. That swagger, that edge, that you still have to go through us mentality, it's new, it's powerful, and it's exactly what fans have been waiting for. So here's where I want to turn it back to you, the ones who bleed Honolulu blue and silver. After everything you just saw, after watching this team dismantle a rival in a way we haven't seen before, do you believe? Do you feel like this is the season the Lions stop being a what if and start being a why not us? Because from where I'm sitting, this feels like the moment. The moment the Detroit Lions stop chasing history and start making it. Because if you think about it, what we just witnessed might be the clearest example yet that the Detroit Lions are finally learning how to dictate games instead of just reacting to them. For too long, we've watched this team play catch up. Catching up in the standings, catching up in games, catching up to expectations. But against Chicago, they flipped the script. They were the ones forcing the Bears to adjust, forcing them into mistakes, forcing them to face the reality that they weren't ready for the level of intensity and execution the Lions brought to the table. That's what great teams do. They don't wait for momentum to find them. They seize it, they strangle it, and they use it to crush whoever stands in front of them. Now let's pause on something that doesn't always get enough attention, Jared Goff. How many times has he been written off, cast aside, doubted, treated like a placeholder instead of a leader? But what did we see in this game? We saw him comfortable, decisive, and in sync with Morton's play calling in a way that made everything look effortless. It wasn't just about the stats, it was about the confidence. Every time he dropped back, every time he orchestrated a drive, there was no hesitation. And when your quarterback is playing with that kind of clarity, that kind of rhythm, it's contagious. The offense feeds off it, the defense feels it, and suddenly the entire team looks unstoppable. That's what happened here. But don't overlook the unsung heroes either. This win wasn't just about the stars, it was about execution across the depth chart. That's another thing that separates this year's team from the ones we've seen in the past. When the game tightened early on, it wasn't one or two guys carrying the load. It was across the board, blocking, tackling, adjustments, everything clicking at the right time. And that's when you know you're watching a team that's not just talented, but well coached, disciplined, and bought into the bigger picture. And think about how satisfying this must be for Dan Campbell. Every coach preaches culture. Every coach talks about buy-in, but only a few actually get their players to embody it. Campbell has done that. This group doesn't just play football, they play his brand of football. Physical, unrelenting, disciplined, and smart. That's not easy to build. It takes years. It takes painful losses, hard lessons, and the kind of resilience that only comes from a locker room that actually believes in the guy leading them. And now, finally, that foundation is showing its payoff in real time. The Chicago Bears thought they had something special when they brought Ben Johnson in. And maybe they do, time will tell. But Sunday was proof that he's not there yet, and more importantly, that Dan Campbell and his staff are operating on another level. This wasn't just about beating the Bears, it was about reclaiming the identity of this offense, proving that Detroit isn't tied to one coordinator or one scheme. They're bigger than that. They're stronger than that. Now, let's be real, this story is just beginning. Baltimore is looming, and that game is going to demand everything this team has. But that's what makes this win so important. You couldn't ask for better momentum heading into a matchup like that. You couldn't ask for a clearer sign that the Lions are ready to compete with anyone, anywhere, at any time. And let's not forget, Baltimore is the kind of team Detroit has to measure itself against if they want to make noise in January. So if you're a fan, this is the perfect setup, the ultimate test, the ultimate chance to prove that what happened against Chicago wasn't a fluke, but the new normal. And honestly, maybe that's the best part of all of this. For the first time in a long time, fans don't just have hope, they have evidence. Evidence that the offense can catch fire early. Evidence that the defense can adjust and shut down opponents. Evidence that Dan Campbell can outcoach his own protégés. Evidence that the Detroit Lions aren't the same old Lions. So I'll ask you again, where do you stand after watching this? Is this just another exciting win in September, or is this the start of the season we've all been waiting for? Because I'll tell you this, the rest of the league is paying attention now, and if this keeps up, they're not going to be able to ignore Detroit any longer. What do you think? Are we watching the birth of something special, or do the Lions still have more to prove before we can start talking about them as true contenders?